The IG report is out and the impeachment hearings continue. A hugely, hugely damaging report about the state of things in Afghanistan. And finally, baby Jesus in a cage? All that's coming up right now on I'm Right. Ladies and gentlemen, I come before you tonight and I'm wearing black. You know why I'm wearing black? Because America has died. I'm just kidding. That's too melodramatic. America's just fine. But we did have a very, very, very big news day with a million big stories we're going to try to churn through as fast as humanly possible. And we all know there's nobody better in the world at churning through the most important things than me. That's why you're here. So first, the IG, Horowitz, he released his report today. Now, before we go into Horowitz's report, let's remember something. There are multiple, in fact, there are 4 to be precise, 4 different investigations going on as we speak about what happened with the Pfizer report under Obama, what happened with the investigation into Trump's campaign with the FBI, CIA, what happened, who did what, was there anything wrong being done? We know that. So this is just one part, the first part of the reports we're going to be getting back. So if you're frustrated, as I very much am, with this crap report we're about to talk about, calm down. It'll be fine. Let's wait to pass judgment until we get the other reports that are still on the way. And just a quick recap for those of you who don't remember, what we know is this. Christopher Steele is a former or current former intelligence agent. We can't seem to get straight information on that. He put together a dossier. As you may have guessed, it's called the Steele dossier. He provided that dossier to Fusion GPS, who was Hillary Clinton's people. That dossier made its way into the hands of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, who used that dossier to some level, we don't know what, although it looks pretty bad, who used that dossier to some level to open up an investigation into President Trump's campaign, and specifically to go after members of Trump's campaign hard, spy on them, investigate them, whatever word you want to use. Now, why does any of this matter? Well, they were American citizens. And there are strict laws in place that govern whether or not the FBI, local law enforcement, whatever it may be, can do things like tap your phones, like wiretap you in any way, investigate you. Why? Because you have rights here in the United States of America. Ask anybody in law enforcement and they will tell you it's hard to get a wiretap approved. Why? Because it should be. Because you do have rights. Because an agent or a federal local sheriff or anybody doesn't get to wake up on the wrong side of the bed one day and say, you know what? I don't like his face. I think we're going to wiretap him. That's not how that works. There are legal protections in place to protect you from that sort of thing from happening. So, Horowitz releases his report today. These are just a couple quotes from it. It's a long report, and I don't read, so you're going to have to deal with my summaries. First, quote, "We determined that the Crossfire Hurricane Team's receipt of Steele's election reporting on September 9th, 2016 played a central and essential role in the FBI's and department's decision to seek the FISA order." Now, ladies and gentlemen, that in and of itself is enormous. Let us not forget, let us remember that Steele's report, Steele's dossier, that was paid for by Hillary Clinton's campaign. Essentially, the Federal Bureau of Investigation used opposition research by the opposing campaign to obtain a warrant to spy on an American citizen. If you don't read anything else, if that was the only part of the report, that is very, very, very damaging. That is bad news. I don't care what your political party is. Let's say you, Joe Republican, are running against, Cindy Comey of the Democrat Party. You do not get to produce your own opposition research as Joe Republican and run to the FBI and say, hey, look, I got something on Cindy Comey. You better do something. And they can take it and go, you know what? I think we will. We'll go to the FISA court and open up warrants. That's a big deal. A very, very big deal. IG continued, "We found that the FBI did not have information corroborating the specific allegations against Carter Page in Steele's reporting when it relied upon his reports in the first FISA application or subsequent renewal applications." So what do you make of all that? That's a big word, corroborating. And by the way, let me just say, we don't do different takes on this show. What you see is what you get. I nailed the word corroborating right out of the gates and have nailed it 3 times since. Not to pat myself on the back. You know I don't brag or anything. So what does that mean in legalese and lawyer speak? What it means is not only did they use the Steele dossier to get the warrants, they didn't have anything to back them up. They didn't have anything that said, you know what, this stuff in the Steele dossier is right. You can go ahead with that. They took straight opposition research from Hillary Clinton's campaign and said, we'll go with this. Let's bring it to the FISA court. That's a big deal. That's a very big deal. Attorney General Barr came out immediately. By the way, this is very, very strange. Immediately, Barr comes out and says, quote, now makes clear that the FBI launched an intrusive investigation of a U.S. presidential campaign on the thinnest of suspicions that, in my view, were insufficient to justify the steps taken. He's saying the FISA warrant was bunk. Obviously, everything we just read to you means that you could also see that the FISA warrant was bunk. Well, therein lies the problem, doesn't it? You can say something's wrong. You can say, that guy should stop robbing the guy. I think he should stop. I think that's wrong. I think it's The question really is, what are you going to do about it? Right? Anyway, Durham came out right away, and I want you to pay attention to this. And remember, Durham is that supposed bulldog of an attorney who was all over the mass corruption in Boston during all the Bulger stuff. Durham has an amazing reputation under Democrats and Republicans for going after corruption relentlessly and finding things. He was not required in any way to make a statement of any kind about IG Horowitz's report today. He was not. And yet Durham comes out with almost an immediate statement, this is only part of it, saying, quote, based on the evidence collected to date, and while our investigation is still ongoing, last month we advised the IG that we do not agree with some of the report's conclusions as to the predication and how the FBI case was opened. It should also be noted at this time that Durham has opened up a criminal investigation into at least one person. We don't know. His report is still forthcoming. Well, what does all this mean? We don't know. We don't know yet. We do know that they continue to cite the fact that there were at least, and I quote this, at least 17 errors made by the FBI in obtaining these warrants, in getting this information. They say they obtained them incompletely. They say they obtained them using inaccurate information. But here's my problem, ladies and gentlemen. You know what we've seen? The real summary of the report from Horowitz, here's what it is. It says that the FBI did some things that were wrong, but they were just mistakes. They found no political bias. It was just, look, whoops. Spilled a little milk. Clumsy me. Anyway, that's it for me. Have a good day. I'm Michael Horowitz. That's my issue, ladies and gentlemen. How is that acceptable? If you are at the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Department of Justice, you have an obligation to rise above that standard. If you're going to investigate and possibly ruin the lives of American citizens anywhere, you have an obligation to be above that. You don't get to say things that I'm already hearing on TV like, well, he was just a low-level guy. He's at the FBI. There is no low level. His level's above everybody's level. If he's investigating you, he's at the Federal Bureau of Investigation. You don't get to say, stupid me. Hey, I just started yesterday. I could open up an accidental warrant on anybody. I'm just such a klutz. No, that doesn't work. And how is that supposed to be some comfort, even if I were to believe that load of bullcrap? Well, I mean, he just made a mistake. So my FBI's incompetent? That's what's supposed to make me feel better? So at best, we have a bunch of dullards at the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and at worst, we have a bunch of Democrat hacks? How is any of that supposed to make anything better? How is any of that supposed to make me feel okay about the current situation of our federal government? It doesn't. And you know what it leads me to believe, people? That the state is perfectly incapable of investigating the state and finding out that the state did anything wrong. Asking Horowitz to investigate the Federal Bureau of Investigation is like asking one of my kids to investigate how the baseball got through my back window. Some reason I don't think they're going to indict themselves. Do you? I'm tired of it. You should be very tired of it too, because nobody in power who continues to abuse the American people ever seems to be held accountable. That's Lois Lerner, if you don't believe me. All right, I ended up getting a little fired up there. We're not going to get to the impeachment stuff. And you know what? It sucked anyway, and it was boring. This IG thing has me all kinds of mad. So we're going to go next to reporter at the New York Post and the Washington Examiner and author of The Great Revolt, Selena Zito. Hang on. Joining me now to talk about this IG report madness and hammer on the impeachment hearing stuff just a little bit is one of my favorite people in the world, co-author of The Great Revolt. Buy it if you haven't already. Also reporter for the New York Post and Washington Examiner, and my goodness, her resume takes forever to get through, Selena Zito. Selena, did you have a chance to at least read the summary of this Horowitz report today? Because it's like 900 pages long and there's all this lawyer speak in it.
Yeah, I don't understand it at all. I really don't. I even tried to search through it, and I didn't understand when I used the search option. It's there's a lot of words there. Your producer today and said, "Can you watch the impeachment?" I'm like, "Do I have to?"
There are a lot of words there. Look, these lawyers only exist, Selena, for us to make fun of them. 2, to put up their hilarious, have you been in an accident billboards we see everywhere, and 3, to put out these long reports with big words that they know nobody can understand. That's why they can bill $500 an hour.
That's right. They almost hypnotize you. You just start reading it, and all of a sudden your IQ level drops like 20, 30 points, and you lose the will to live. That's pretty much what these types of reports do. There's a lot of stories out there. I would think that the FBI's behavior, it doesn't look very good. It doesn't, and I don't know if that's going to be the consensus among my profession, but from what I did read, it seems they appear to work with a very, very heavy hand.
Well, I will say this, speaking of your profession, which I despise anyway, I mean, not you in particular, a little bit you, but not you in particular. Speaking of your profession, I will tell you I've been a little bit encouraged today in that I have seen people are taking this 17 instances of inaccuracies or incomplete data. They're taking that information and they are saying, wait a minute now, that's certainly not good. You're the FBI.
Yeah. And, Jesse, this gets to our larger problem that we've had I would say, for building for a decade, but in particular, since Donald Trump started to run for office in 2015. Our lack of trust in institutions, because they've let them not only let us down on numerous instances on very important matters, but they also have sort of behaved in a way that is, we know better. We are better than you. We're smarter than you. And we have power and you don't, little people. And that's this problem with larger institutions just continues because of reports like this.
No, I agree. And look, I've already had enough of it. I had enough of it a long time ago. I hope, and maybe you can speak to this a little since you're always out there in the heartland at bed and breakfasts all over the place. Does that feeling translate across, the Rust Belt where you seem to reside? Do people talk about, maybe not specifically the FBI, but government power in general, government bureaucrats? Do they talk about them like, man, I've had a little bit enough of this?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're from a certain generation, if you're from my generation, you take a look at this and say, look, we have had a problem with larger institutions, beginning with Watergate and beginning with the Vietnam War. And it's only escalated. And if you go back and look at trusting government back in 1964, 65, 66, it was at like 78%. It completely started to cave during Watergate and during the Vietnam War, because we saw how these institutions were not only part of the cover-up, but they were also part of helping to maintain our place in a war where reports that came out were heavy-handed. And everything just started to fall apart at that moment. It was incremental, but it has happened. So institutions like the FBI, the CIA, the government, but also newspapers and news organizations, all of that started to collapse around 1968, and we're now in reverse of what it was, where 78% of the people do not trust the government. And I don't even know who those 20-some percentage are that do trust the government. I've never met that person.
Yeah, I can't imagine how big of a chump you have to be to trust the government at this point in time. You know, speaking of 68, 69, maybe, just maybe, it was the Pentagon papers that came out that revealed that basically every senior person in the United States government had been lying to the people for years. But that's another matter. Let's move on to something else here. The impeachment inquiry today hearing from Nadler. We have this little clip from Doug Collins before I come back to you. Hang on.
There have been famous moments in impeachment as we've gone forward. There are famous lines from Nixon like, what did the president know and when did he know it? From the Clinton impeachment, there was, I did not have sex with that woman. What would be known about this one is probably, where's the impeachable offense? Why are we here? I tell you, this may be, though, become known as the focus group impeachment. Because we don't have a crime, we don't have anything we can actually pin, and nobody understands really what the majority is trying to do, except that interfere and basically make sure that they believe the president can't win next year if he's impeached. The focus group impeachment takes words and then takes them to people and say, how can we explain this better? Because we don't have the facts to match it. A focus group impeachment says, you know, we really aren't working with good facts, but we need a good PR move. That's why we're here today.
Selena, where's he wrong? Speaking of focus groups, you don't really do focus groups, but you do go out there and talk to people in little diners where you can get amazing cheeseburgers. What are they seeing about it? Because what I see, obviously I'm a biased political hack. I don't pretend to be otherwise. What are the non-biased people saying?
Well, you know, it sort of reminds me of when Scott Walker ran for governor the first time in 2010. Then the Democrats were mad, the press was mad, and so they worked up the ability to recall his election and have him go through the election all over again. And what happened is he won by more votes. Here's why: because people saw the unfairness of it. They saw that this was orchestrated and this was conjured up not only by the press but also by Democrats. And even if they didn't vote for Walker in 2010, a lot of people, I covered that extensively, a lot of people showed up and voted for him because they thought he was treated unfairly. I see a lot of that sort of same pragmatic sentiment about Trump right now, where voters, whether they're Republicans or Democrats or independents, the ones that did vote for him are solidly behind him. The ones who didn't vote for him are looking at this and saying, you're just trying to win an election that you couldn't win on your own. So you're trying to take him out through this impeachment process that comes across as a wild circus. And a lot of people are moving towards him, or at least not going to show up and vote for Democrats because they've been disgusted by their behavior.
Selena, I'm going to ask basically for you to predict the future for me here, because you know and I don't. Essentially, this impeachment inquiry is I believe they're going to file articles of impeachment. I don't think anything can stop that now. And I believe it's going to pass. That's what the Democrat Party has become. So this goes to the Senate. But I have this theory about independents and these swing voters, basically, who voted for Obama twice and then voted for Trump. I'll never understand that person. That person's a weirdo to me, but that's not my business. Does that person only half pay attention? And I ask this because I'm worried when this moves to the Senate, they will go from being annoyed with Democrats and their sham impeachment to being annoyed with Republicans and what they view as a Republican sham impeachment, because Republicans are now running the show.
No, I think, well, first of all, people are pretty tuned out. Look at the ratings on the impeachment alone. People are not paying attention to this. And I think that they just think, there's a disdain for whether you're a Republican or Democrat, for whoever works in Washington. And I think the Democrats are the ones that are going to suffer the most from this decision to impeach. Remember, there is 31 House Democrats who won their seats in swing districts, including the district that I live in, Pennsylvania's 17th congressional district, where Connor Lamb ran as a moderate who was not going to vote on impeachment and just wanted to get things done. And what has he been able to talk about? Nothing except impeachment. Voters keep sending a message to Washington with their vote, and Washington keeps misreading that vote. They keep thinking, oh, it's about me. It's about me. You like this again. Voters didn't like Democrats more in 2018. They just wanted to put the brakes on Trump. What they got instead was an impeachment process that, most people think impeachment is incredibly serious and should be incredibly rare. And it should not be used as a political sledgehammer. I think ultimately Democrats suffer from this on both House and Senate.
Nothing worse than a politician who thinks it's all about themselves, Selena. That's why I take comfort in the knowledge that it's actually all about me.
It is all about you, Jesse. It always is.
Exactly. Yeah, actually it is. Reporter for the New York Post and the Washington Examiner and co-author of The Great Revolt, Selena Zito, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Now, speaking of the Pentagon Papers, a scathing report came out today about the war in Afghanistan, and some very powerful people knew some very bad things. We'll tell you here in just a second. Ladies and gentlemen, before I go into this whole Afghanistan thing, I want you to understand something. I want you to understand and keep in the back of your mind as we go through this, the human element to all this, the human element as in the loss of life, the loss of limbs when it comes to that war, to any war. But we have over 2,000 American troops dead from Afghanistan, 20,000 wounded. You may have not had to do this, but I have walked the halls of the VA, including very recently, and where those halls used to be packed full of, older men, those walls are now packed full of young men. Young men oftentimes wheeling themselves up and down the halls, missing a leg or two, an arm or two, maimed, faces, families ruined. War is a awful thing. It is a truly, truly awful thing. Having seen it myself, I wouldn't wish it on anybody. So understand, when we send our men and women off to war, I do not consider that to be a small deal. I consider it to be a very, very big, big, big deal, and should be treated by the people who send those people off to war as a very, very, very big deal. And on top of the people who have died, on top of the people who've lost limbs, let us not forget all the Gold Star parents, all the Gold Star spouses, all the Gold Star children out there from the war in Afghanistan. I don't say that to bring you down. I don't like to bring you down. You know we like to do a fun show here, and we'll always do a fun show here. But you need to keep those people in the back of your mind when we go into this report from the Washington Post that just came out. It was a long report, and I can't believe I'm saying this about the Washington Post. It's one of the best pieces of journalism I've ever seen in my entire lifetime. There is so much damaging information in here. I don't have enough time in a 1-hour show to go over it with you. Essentially, this is what it says, and I don't have a better way to put it than this. Very, very, very early on, the United States of America realized that they had no idea what they were doing in Afghanistan. They didn't know what our mission was. They didn't know what our mission should be. They didn't know what the enemy was doing. They didn't know who the enemy was half the time. Is it Al-Qaeda? Is it the Taliban? Not only that, they had no idea how to proceed going forward. Our men and women who were actually on the ground dying didn't know, and to this day still do not know what the mission was. Some of them thought we were there for women's rights. On my life, I'm not making that up. And now, it gets worse, ladies and gentlemen. Now, they don't know how to get out. We still don't know who the enemy is. We still don't know who the mission is, and we have no idea how to get out of a country that we do not understand. We took a government, we propped up this brand new government in Afghanistan thinking that they would understand a strong central democracy when that's completely foreign to anything those people have ever known in their lives. Obviously, they rejected it because it is a tribal society. They wouldn't even understand how to deal with that. And now that that has fallen on its rear end, we are now currently propping up Afghanistan's security forces. You see that word a lot, security forces. We're trying to prop up the security forces. Although now we know what I already knew because I happen to talk to people on the ground there. Now we know for a fact that the security forces, as they currently stand, even though they've been trained and equipped by the best and brightest in America for years, the security forces, as they currently stand, would collapse like that at the hands of the Taliban if we left tomorrow. Essentially, we've been mired in Afghanistan since the year 2001 with a missionless army, with an army that, all the money in the world we've thrown at the problem, but they didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know who they were doing it to. They didn't know why they were doing it, and now we don't know how to stop doing it. That would be funny if it was some dark comedy on TV, except it's not a dark comedy on TV, except we're still burying United States warriors over the whole thing. We've buried too many, we've maimed too many, and now, I'm sorry, when I get reports like this, finding out that the highest levels of American leadership knew this whole thing was a bunch of crap, it makes my blood boil to no end. And this wasn't just presidents. This wasn't just George Bush. This wasn't just Barack Obama. This wasn't just Donald Trump. This was bureaucrats. This was senators. This was generals, and lots of them, sugarcoating things. Well, we're making progress. Things are going fine. Oh, we're making progress. You always heard that word, right? They still trot it out all the time. We're making real progress. I think we're making progress. We're not making any progress at all. We are absolutely losing. In fact, if you want to look at it very, very frankly, we have lost, and any life we lose from this point forward in that dump of a country is on the leadership in this United States of America. It's not good enough. And the reason I'm so mad about it is because our people who sign up to fight and die for this country deserve a lot better than that garbage. Now, the Washington Post reporter who put this stuff out sat down with a little interview. He summarized some of what's in it. Here it is.
A few excerpts that I was shocked at. I mean, there was Doug Lute, General Lute, who was the Afghan war czar in the White House for 2 administrations, Bush and Obama. So this guy was, from the White House perspective, overseeing the war. And he's saying things like, we had no idea what we were doing. He said, I bumped into an even more fundamental lack of knowledge. We were devoid of a fundamental understanding of Afghanistan. General Dan McNeill, who was a 2-time military commander there. I tried to get someone to define for me what winning meant even before I went over, and nobody could. This is the commanding officer 2 times of the military in Afghanistan. To me, it's pretty astounding. These are the people in charge of the war, essentially saying it was a disaster, and they knew it. But I don't see any of these comments in your lessons learned reports. Why didn't you include those?
And that is sort of the limitation of where we go. See, as an inspector general, I don't do policy. What all you quoted were people talking about a bad policy.
Just to clarify for you, that is the command. Well, not in that video, but they were talking about the guy in charge of the Afghanistan war for not 1 but 2 presidents didn't know what we were doing. Wait, what? How do you look those families in the face? Those families who are about to do Christmas without daddy, without mommy, without son sitting around there. How do you look them in the face and say, well, we've never really known? I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, it's not good enough. I've got Donald Rumsfeld here in a memo from 2003. That's pretty much right after we got there, saying I have no visibility into into who the bad guys are in Afghanistan or Iraq. Well, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Donald Rumsfeld himself didn't even know who we were fighting. And here it is. Oh yeah, it's still 2019, about to be 2020, and we're still there. Oh, we're not done with Rumsfeld. September 12th, 2003. Quote, the lack of clarity as to who the enemies are and what the problems are from an intelligence standpoint in Afghanistan and Iraq is serious. We didn't know. We don't know now. And this is from 2003. We've never known. And yet other people were fighting. Other people are dying. while we sit back here in the United States of America, we're continually deploying and deploying and deploying and deploying. And nobody knows why. Oh, and nobody can tell me how we're ever going to get out. Do you remember in the not too recent history when Donald Trump didn't even pull them out, by the way, pulled 1,000 troops in Syria to the side? Simply moved them from here to here in Syria. Do you remember what that was like? Let me refresh your memory in case you don't remember. It was apocalyptic doomsday disaster from every pundit on TV, from every politician with a microphone in their face. Everyone's going to die. The Kurds are going to die. This is a disaster. Ah! That was the response to moving 1,000 troops from point A to point B within the country of Syria. We have 13,000 troops currently in Afghanistan. Villagers will be, not maybe, will be massacred in horrible ways by the Taliban when we leave. If that was the response to 1,000 troops moving from here to there in Syria, what do you think people would say if we tried to get out of Afghanistan? Ladies and gentlemen, I try not to do dark stuff here. As you know, we try to keep it fun. I am not confident we will be out of Afghanistan by the year 3000. On my life, I'm not making that up. Look at what that looks like now. Look at what it will look like. We pull out, the Taliban will take over. That's not a guess. Don't argue with me, although nobody knowledgeable would. The Taliban would take over. They're the most powerful force in Afghanistan. When the Taliban took over, they would immediately find all the villages and villagers who in their minds collaborated with the American troops, and they would do things to them like you've never seen in the worst horror movie of your life. Our anti-Republican press would immediately cover all of these events at length, blame it all on the Republicans, and the Republicans know this, so they won't have the guts to get out because the American people would not have the stomach to watch what would happen if we did. So we're there. Apparently, we're always going to be there. Barack Obama in 2013, well, he had this to say. He had a plan.
Tonight, I can announce that over the next year, another 34,000 American troops will come home from Afghanistan. This drawdown will continue, and by the end of next year, our war in Afghanistan will be over.
That was 2013, by the way. Joining me to talk about this and hopefully calm me down a little bit is senior columnist with townhall.com, one of my buddies, Kurt Schlichter. Hang on. Joining me now to opine about, well, pretty much everything I've gone over on the show, my buddy, senior columnist at townhall.com, Kurt Schlichter. Kurt, I have to tell you, man, my blood pressure is a little bit high about this Afghanistan thing. I'm normally pretty okay with whatever the political stuff rolls down, but I woke up today and I read this report. Not that any part of this report shocked me, but when I see in black and white that our top generals, our top politicians have known that we have no mission, we don't know who we are, we don't know who they are, we don't have a plan to get in, we don't have a plan to get out, we have no plan whatsoever besides chuck money and bodies at the whole thing. Man, I'm telling you what, treating our men and women in uniform like that makes me, it makes me angry.
It's a disgrace. It's interesting that, you know, I'm a little older than you. I was trained by the guys from Vietnam. They are the guys who rebuilt the army after Vietnam, rebuilt the military, promised not to make the same mistakes again. And that generation came, and that generation has largely gone. Well, actually, it's completely gone. My generation is pretty much gone. And apparently those lessons were not passed down. Apparently, once 9/11 happened, we forgot everything we learned about fighting wars and winning wars, and instead decided to do this mouse on a treadmill thing in Afghanistan. And unfortunately, that means dead Americans. And I wish I could be more surprised. I'm utterly appalled. But we all knew this was happening. And here's the clincher. The guy the entire foreign policy establishment has been mocking as ignorant, stupid, and incompetent, Donald Trump, was absolutely right. This is yet another massive fail by the foreign policy establishment that has a track record of failure stretching back pretty much until the day after the wall fell back in 1989. It's time to go. It's time to say we're done. We've done all we can. It's absolutely clear now. There really can't be any debate. And I'm sick of reading about onesies and twosies of dead Americans in a war that we are not willing to win.
Kurt, how do we get out? And the reason I ask is this, because the one thing you and I both know about the place is that it's an extremely tribal place. We also know that the Taliban are currently the most powerful force by a country mile in Afghanistan. And if we pull out, okay, we pull out tomorrow, which I'd be all fine no matter what happened. We pull out tomorrow, the Taliban go in and they begin massacring anybody who ever had anything to do with us. We know that would happen. We also know our disgusting media would use that to try to hammer on Republicans for it. And the American public would quickly turn around and be like, why are you letting this happen? So is there any way, is there any comfortable way we can get out? Or should we just rip that daggone Band-Aid off and be on a C-130 tomorrow?
You know, at this point, I think we need to tell our erstwhile allies, guys, we're handing you the ball. We've been telling you that for 2 decades, but we're actually going to do it now. And I think what Trump needs to do is take it to Congress and get Congress down on the record. Let's get the Democrats on the record. Let's get the Republicans on the record. What do you want to do? Do you want to keep going in circles in Afghanistan, or do you want to pull out and accept the consequences? Make a choice, make a decision. Here's Trump's recommendation. Do X. What do you guys say? Because I'm so sick of people refusing to put their own skin in the game, in the not in the actual sense of actually going and fighting, because as we know, our elite isn't fighting the war in Afghanistan. It's regular folks. It's time for our elite to say either, yes, we're going to continue this waste of lives, or no, we're going to pull out and there may be some bad consequences. And like grown men and women, we're going to accept them as a part of reality.
Kurt, switching gears a little bit here, this IG report came out today, and obviously everybody has their own take on it. I'm sorry, Kurt, I don't find 17 different mishaps when it comes to obtaining a warrant to spy on an American citizen. I do not find that in any way to be a minor deal. Even if you were to explain that away as just incompetence and not political bias, which in no way would I believe that, but even if you explain that away, I'm sorry, you're at the Federal Bureau of Investigation. You need to be above little mistakes that result in my freedoms being violated. What say you?
Once again, our elite, our betters, our ruling class has utterly failed in its most basic duty, which is to observe and enforce the law. Somewhere along the line, in the World War II generation, right? They beat Hitler. In the 60s, they managed to pull off civil rights and put a man on the moon. What has our ruling class done in the last 25 years besides get confused over which bathroom to use? I mean, we have, and Instapundit Glenn Reynolds says it all the time, the worst ruling class in history. They're terrible. They're incompetent about everything. They are lawless. They are immoral. They're a disgrace. And it's not that it can't continue. It's that it won't continue. Because you and I are familiar with history, something they don't teach in school anymore because they're too busy talking about the history of oppression. History records that people do not tolerate this over the long term. Bad things are going to happen, and it's all their fault.
I tend to agree. I actually it's so funny you brought that up out of this conversation exactly with a buddy this morning, and that I feel like this is, people on the left or people in, the government who feel like they were trying to go after Donald Trump or protect Democrats. They think this is a win. This is a net loss in the end, because the more you disenfranchise the American people, the more dangerous things become for people who hold the reins of power.
See, here's the problem. We have an entire generation of elitists who've never been in a fist fight. That's the problem.
It really is the problem, Gert.
They think that problems get solved by running to the provost or complaining a lot or firing off a clever tweet. And the problem is the people that they're trying to stamp their Birkenstocks down on don't have those outlets. They don't have that way to be heard. They have a different way to be heard, and they're going to be heard. This is a problem when you have people who don't understand their own country. At least in World War II, you walk into a barracks and there's a guy from Oklahoma and he's next to a guy from Chicago and next to a guy from Iowa, next to a guy from the Bronx. And you had all this mix, and they came out and said, well, I know a little more about America because I would, when I was a soldier, when I went to basic training 32 years ago today, I was a California kid in Oklahoma. I was the only Californian there. Nobody else knew what a Californian was. They knew me. I didn't know what the hell a guy from Alabama was like. I ended up living in Alabama for 5 or 6 months training. I got a view of America, and I understand that Americans don't take guff. Can I say guff? I hope I could say guff.
I think you could say guff. Okay, there's nothing wrong with guff. Kurt Schlichter, senior columnist, townhall.com. Thank you so much for giving me some time tonight, man.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, somebody put a cage around baby Jesus and Mary and Joseph, and these people are insufferable. Hang on, I'll show you. All right, I will keep this very, very, very brief, but I wanted to issue you a warning. 'Tis the season. Yes, it is the season of giving. It is the season where we celebrate the birth of Jesus. Do that, you heathens. It's a season where we, give back to others. It's a season we get things. It's a wonderful time. It's a time of cookies, of Christmas decorations, of children's laughter, of snowball fights. And it also is the season where we get the annual tradition of people pretending that Jesus, Mary, and Joseph were refugees. On my life, what I'm about to show you is not made up, and on my life, it's not going to be the last time you have to endure something like this Christmas season. As you can see from the screen, people are, they put a cage around Mary and Joseph, and not only did they put a cage around baby Jesus, they also put a tinfoil blanket over the top of him to indicate that he's a refugee, just like the migrant crisis. It's absolutely maddening. I don't know what's worse, the fact that morons do this, the fact that they think this is effective, or the fact they don't even read the Bible. All you have to do is read the Bible to know they were not refugees in any possible way. They were going from here to there for the census, completely free to do so. My word. It is brutal. But this is only one of many, ladies and gentlemen. And you know what? I just made an executive decision on the air because I have to suffer through these Jesus was a refugee stories. You have to suffer as well. And every time I see one, I will play it for you on this show so we can join together in our suffering and laugh at liberals because that's what we do. Now, it was a heavy show tonight. Lord willing, it will be a lighter show tomorrow, but I can make no promises, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just a humble servant. All right, I'm not humble, I'm an awesome servant, but you get the gist. All that may have made you uncomfortable, but I'm right. I'll see you tomorrow.